Thanks again, everyone, for being here. This is the first in a joint effort by the Asian Business League of San Francisco, the Asian Leaders Alliance, and NAP San Francisco in doing what we've always done for years and years, but we've gotten together to provide a free professional development series open to anyone. And we're just so pleased that over 215 people signed up for our event. We will give more information out at the end of this one on our next meeting, which will be in a month. And we've actually got the first 3 already planned and scheduled. A little bit about me. My name is Keith Koo. I'm on the board of the Asian Business League, one of the co-sponsors of this event. I do a few things. Many of you know me for a radio show I host in Silicon Valley called Silicon Valley Insider. It's on technology and business. I do want to thank all of our co-sponsors. So the Asian Business League, the Asian Leaders Alliance, which is a large group of Asian ERGs. Jimmy Hua, who's in the chat, he's one of the leaders. And we'll also give you information after this event through the way we've been communicating with you is through Hub. And then also like to thank NAP San Francisco, and it's really good to see that many NAP chapters are with us today. Our special guest tonight is Kang. Karen is a very well-known brand strategist. Karen has personally coached over 150 corporations, so Fortune 100 to 500 companies, as well as nonprofits and startups. And as well, she's coached over thousands of individuals. Karen is actually retired, and she wanted to make sure everyone knew that she's going to stay retired, but she came out of retirement just to be with us tonight. So I really thank Karen for being here. And tonight's topic's on personal branding. So we're going to have half an hour with Karen on her topic. We're going to do 25 minutes of Q&A. And then for those who want to stick around in the Zoom, we're going to have a networking session right after that. Karen won't be available, so it'll just be the group. Also, if you have questions, because Karen's presentation is usually an hour long, but she's condensed it for the first time and the last time in a half an hour format, all the questions you can do submit several ways. You can go into the group chat, or you can individually or privately chat Ramon, who is one of our co-hosts. And then we're going to aggregate all the questions at the end, group them together, and then we'll be asking Karen during that 25-minute period. So, Karen, thank you so much for being here. Anything you'd like to add on your own introduction? We'll unmute Karen.
I think you might be still on mute, Karen.
Okay.
There you go.
Let me start over again. This is not how you're supposed to start your Zoom meeting. Anyway, thank you very much, Keith, and I'm excited to be here today, beaming in from the north coast of San Diego, where I live now. I just wanted to say that personal branding is one of my favorite topics because it is so empowering to know who you are and what makes you unique. The other thing about personal branding is that it really works. A case in point is that 10 years ago, I did a personal branding cohort with 16 director-level women at a global company. I think that the senior management really wanted, senior leadership really wanted to see more women, more diversity in their ranks, and they felt that what was holding the women back was a lack of confidence and their actual presence and ability to speak forcefully and be an advocate for them for themselves. Well, 12 months after we did the training, all 16 women were either promoted or found the job that they desired. That is an outstanding statistic. And a number of them have now gone on to become vice presidents and senior vice presidents at this Global 500 company. Now, I can't guarantee the same results for you, but what I can say is that if you work on your personal brand, you will definitely see rewards. personal branding does pay, and I'd like to take this time now to talk about how you take charge of your brand. Next slide. I don't have to tell you that we live in a changing world. We're in the midst of a pandemic. Business has been turned on its ear. Millions of people are out of work, and those who are still employed are hanging on for dear lives. The job market is really fierce in terms of competition, and compounding all of this is the virtualization of work. I mean, here we are on Zoom and on Facebook, whereas normally we would be meeting in person. And there are definite challenges to branding yourself, to presenting yourself in a positive light in a virtual world. So we'll talk about that later. The other thing that is changing in our society is Black Lives Matter. You know, the fact that we had this horrible killing of George Floyd and many others, it's so clear that we have systemic racism in our society. And if we're going to be serious leaders, we have to champion anti-Blackness and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Next slide. So with all this change, we have new criteria for leadership. And if you look at this word cloud, the operative words are creativity, collaboration, leading transformations, embracing ambiguity, giving power to teams, and diversity and inclusion. I want you to just take a moment and let that sit with you for a while. How well do you measure up to the new criteria? Basically, all of these things, if we are going to transform business as business needs to be transformed in this very topsy-turvy world, then we need to be able to communicate, we need to be able to make human connections. And all of those things are really soft skills. So hard skills will get you in the door, but soft skills will get you promoted. So I bring this up because unfortunately, Asian Americans have been held back from top leadership positions because of this stereotype of not being good at social skills, not being bold and inspiring leaders. And the whole model minority myth has worked against us. It has positioned us as followers and those that are not willing to take a risk, as opposed to the people that you want to be charging up the hill with. So this brings me to say that we need to rebrand ourselves. We do not have to be victims. We need to take the horns and just go with it. And so I would like to take this time to really give you some tips, give you some tools so that you can rebrand or reinvent yourself. Next slide. One of the fallacies that has been working against us is this notion that great work will translate to a great reputation. And it's just not so. That's just not how business works. I mean, you can think back to how many times in your career someone was promoted, whereas there were other people who had better work product, perhaps more talent, better education, all of that, and yet these other people were promoted. Now, why was that? Perhaps they had a stronger brand and stronger connections. So this is all about personal branding. So you can't wait for your boss to brand you. You have to brand yourself. You have to think of yourself as a company of one, and you are the brand manager of your company and of your product. And only then can you make sure that you control the narrative for what you're saying about yourself, and hopefully through education, what other people are saying about you. Because it's not just what you say about yourself. It really depends on what other people perceive and what they say. So owning your own brand is not a, like to do, it's a gotta do. And it is definitely a career requirement, and more so today than ever before. Sometimes I think that people, especially Asian Americans, a number of women, think that self-promotion is a vice or something that they don't want to do. So I'd like to change the way you think about it into education, because education is a value that we can all embrace and not think of it so much as promotion. And also shift the focus away from me to we, because truly, if you hide your brand under a little bushel basket and never show anyone the light of what you can do, then you're denying the world your talents and your unique expertise and skills. So the world will be a better place if you brand yourself and educate people on what you're all about. Next slide. Luckily, personal branding is not rocket science. I like to say, bake the cake, then ice it. It's a simple metaphor for what branding is all about. If brand is your image and reputation, then branding is the act of coming up with a strategy and actions to guide that brand. And the way we do it is through this metaphor that I call cake and icing. Think of the cake as your foundation, your rational value, your hard skills, your education, your technical expertise. And think of the icing as your emotional value, what you bring to the party in terms of soft skills, communication, empathy, presence, and image. And you really need both cake and icing to have a strong brand. I remember I did a seminar once in Silicon Valley, and a Chinese American engineer, a young woman, came up to me and said, "Oh, Karen, I have a problem." And I said, "What's your problem?" She said, "I'm all cake and no icing." And I said, "Well, everyone has icing. I mean, even smiling is icing." So I said, just think about some of the soft skills that may not be your strong suit. Pick one or two, and you can work on them. And she said, "The other problem I have is I don't speak up in meetings." And I said, "Well, why don't you?" And she said, "Because, in my culture, we always defer to the boss, and we defer to others. And so I don't want to speak up in meetings." And I said, "If you're invited to a meeting, you're invited to contribute. And you don't want to be positioned or branded as a bump on a log, because you will show no value and you won't be invited to meetings anymore." So I said, really, you need to take a place at the table and contribute, because if you contribute your ideas, other people, it may spark ideas in other people. And through that group dynamic and that process, you might come up with a better idea or a better solution. So you owe it to people to participate in meetings. So a few months later, she came back to me and she said, "I took your advice, and my boss looked at me in a different light, and other team members did. And before I knew it, I got selected to lead a new initiative." And she was so excited about that. So people can change, and perceptions of people can change. You just have to work at it. Next slide. So basically, you have to be your own brand manager. Again, I said, think of yourself as a company of one, and you have the job to brand yourself. So a former boss of mine told me that I wasn't strategic enough. This was quite a long time ago. And I said, ouch. But I didn't put my head in the sand. I decided to do something about it. So I started reading everything I could about marketing strategy. And I also volunteered for as many projects as I could where I knew there'd be other smart and strategic thinkers on the project, and I could observe how they thought and hopefully learn from them. And luckily, I did. And today, you know, I've done transformational strategy projects for Fortune 500 companies and startups, and I am seen as a top 30 global gurus of brand, and I've been on the list for the last 10 years. So it's something that you can actually work at and do. And it didn't happen overnight for me, but people ask me, how did you become a brand strategist? Well, I use my Branding Pays 5-step system, and the 5 things were positioning, messages, brand strategy, ecosystem, and actions. So number 1, in positioning, I position myself as a positioning and brand strategist for Silicon Valley. And I chose that because I didn't want to be known just as a PR person, which I could have said I was just a PR person or a communication specialist. I saw that being a brand strategist was more unique, especially in Silicon Valley, perhaps not so much in consumer companies, but I said Silicon Valley. And especially at that time, 10 years ago, you know, there was a huge opportunity. And second of all, I wanted to position myself in a way that I could springboard off of my former work that I did, which was a lot of corporate positioning. And eventually I segued into personal branding. So you can see that you can expand or change your positioning or reinvent yourself for different market opportunities. Now, messaging. I knew that I had to message very clearly and consistently, and also in terms of visual branding. So I really picked an upbeat palette, and I wanted to be seen as open and passionate about helping other people brand for success. My brand strategy, you know, I looked around and I said, I need to do a 360-degree brand strategy. And one of the things that people had told me in the past is that they found me somewhat intimidating. And I said, oh, no, that is not going to work. I've got to lighten up. I've got to appear more open and approachable. And that's why you see on my website and in the branding for this particular talk, me with my arms outstretched, because when your arms are open, that's an open stance. If I was standing there with my arms crossed with a pursed lip smile, I don't think that I would have achieved what I wanted to in branding. The 4th step is the ecosystem. And basically, that's just the influencers and the partners and allies that you can call on to help you to reach your goal. And for me, the ecosystem included a lot of people from my past clients, partners, other third parties that had worked with me before. And I made a point of educating them before I went out and was public with all my branding. And that really helps, because then you kind of grease the skids and you have a ready supply of people and advocates that will corroborate what you're saying about your brand. And finally, the actions. When you take action, you have to execute well. And I wanted to do social media. I wanted to write a book. I did public speaking. I did media tours. And in the end, I had over 50 media that were writing about me. And I was in Business Week, Fortune, Forbes, Fast Company. I also was on all the network affiliates, you know, ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox, all saying that I was a branding expert. So it didn't happen overnight, but if you work at it, you can achieve international recognition for the expertise that you want to be known for. Next slide. So we don't have time to go through all 5 steps in the branding pace system, but what I wanted to do is pull a couple of templates that would help you. These are tools that you can use to brand yourself. And one of the most important thing is actually having an elevator pitch, because you only have a few seconds to make a good impression. And so when you meet someone, it might be between floors in an elevator, you don't want to be stumbling around trying to figure out what to say about yourself. So we work on an elevator pitch, and basically it's a set of talking points that you can use, because an elevator pitch you're not always going to have an opportunity to just have 30 seconds or a minute just to talk about yourself. Most often it's done as a give and take. Maybe you're at a networking event and someone asks you a question, what do you do? And, you can answer it in, your most advantageous way. So let's look at this sample that I put together. So if you have 10 seconds, you can say who you are and what you do. In this case, it's, hello, I'm Jane Lee, Product Development Director and Innovation Leader at 123 Company. Say you have 30 seconds, you can add context and value statements to that. The pandemic effects on business mean all companies must innovate or die. I'm known for transforming engineering into an open culture of innovation. So in the context that Jane has done, she brings in the pandemic, which everyone's thinking about. So it's going to be high value to them to hear what she has to say next. She talks about how companies must innovate, and she's already positioned herself as an innovation leader in the first 10 seconds. And she talks about transforming engineering, so she's a transformational leader, and talks about an open culture of innovation. So she's open and transparent. And so that speaks to her core values as well. If you have 60 seconds or more, you can provide some evidence. And evidence is very important. If you're going to be making positioning claims, you're not going to have a lot of credibility unless you can back it up. So she says, our team has developed practices that promote a safe and productive culture where innovation happens. Engineers feel empowered and product development has increased at a rapid rate. So if she had more time, she could provide additional metrics, maybe a survey of engineering and engineering engagement. Maybe she would be doing training throughout the company in different departments on how to encourage a culture of innovation. Perhaps she could even go outside the company and do talks at professional associations, or write a blog, or be on podcasts. There's so many things that you can do if you have a particular expertise. It just depends on you kind of figuring out, with all the things in your toolkit, what you can really be positioned as, and how you can be unique, and how you can find a niche that you can call your own. Next slide. So this is a rather busy slide, but I wanted to put, again, the 5 branding pace steps on one slide and show you how they might correspond to what you could do on LinkedIn. So show of hands, how many of you are active on LinkedIn? I hope all of you are. Good, you get a gold star, Keith. Because LinkedIn is the most important business networking platform. I mean, there are 660 million users of LinkedIn worldwide. And it's a tremendous platform, especially since only 1% actually do posts on a regular basis. So if you're that 1%, just think of what a big opportunity that is for you. So let's start with the first branding pace step, which is positioning. What you can do on LinkedIn is use it for your headline and about section. You can stand out as a leader in your space, and you can message in that about section by creating your narrative. And I want you to control your narrative. This is your story. This is how you're going to tell your story. And you have to pick and choose. And what are the most important things? If you're on LinkedIn and you have a certain goal in mind, it will determine how you're going to write your headline. And it will determine how you write that about section. And it will also determine what kind of connections you make. So the evidence will be provided in the background or experience section. It should also be in your emails to connections. I want you to be consistent in everything you do and say. Number 3, brand strategy. And I'm talking about 360-degree brand strategy. So you're going to be looking at your core values and wanting to represent your strengths, your personality, your image, and your brand promise. And you can communicate all those things, even on LinkedIn, which seems like a more static platform, but it's not really. You can communicate through your words, through the color palette that you choose, through the visuals that you put on LinkedIn. And let me just say that a photo on LinkedIn with your profile will get you 21 times more viewership than if you didn't have a photo. And if you have other visuals, like let's say you're at a conference and you want to be known as being influential in that space, then you would want to show yourself at a conference in your particular area and maybe surrounded by other influencers or other people to show that you're open, that you're sharing your expertise and all of that. And your post should be primarily about that area that you're trying to be known for. Don't just post about vacations on LinkedIn. That's not the proper platform. And also the sharing that you do, because you want to have two-way value, which I'll talk about in the ecosystem area. So number 4, the ecosystem. This is where you're building connections, and you can develop relationships one-on-one through direct messaging of people and also through groups. And if you haven't taken advantage of the groups, I would really recommend that you do that. I mean, there's some natural groups for you to be a part of. For instance, if you went to a certain university, well, by all means, be part of that group. If your company has a group, be part of that group. If you're in marketing or if you're in biopharmaceuticals or any of these, more specific areas, there are groups galore that you can be a part of. And once you're in a group, you can be a big fish in a smaller pond. I mean, 660 million people on LinkedIn, that's kind of daunting. But in a group of, say, 1,000 or 500 people, you can make yourself known and you can make friends and advocate for each other. I also hope that you're getting recommendations on LinkedIn, because that's part of the whole ecosystem dynamic. People are looking at your profile, but they want to know, well, is she really telling the truth? I mean, has she done all those things? But if you have a number of people backing you up, people who are credible, then that stands for a lot. So remember, it's not just what you say, it's what other people say. And finally, number 5, the branding phase step, action. So here you'd be doing your profile updates, your engagement, your, updating your images and evidence, and hopefully over time, really showing your expertise and your leadership and showing momentum. And people will notice that kind of growing momentum, in your brand and in your LinkedIn profile and in your LinkedIn connections. Next slide. This is an example of Gisela Paulson's LinkedIn page a few years ago. And Gisela was also in the original cohort that I talked about. And she gave her permission to use this old LinkedIn profile, which I think is a good one. Let me just look at her headline. First of all, she's Gisela Paulson, and she shows her advanced degree after her name. And I think that's important, especially if you're in academia, if you're in technology, if you're in business, you'd want to have your MBA behind your name. It just gives you instant credibility for knowing a certain set of information or having a certain set of skills. So she put VP Genentech Access Solutions, and she included Genentech in her title because it's such an iconic brand. She just wanted to highlight it, even though LinkedIn will put your company underneath your title. So under current, it actually says Genentech, but she wanted to make a special focus on that. And she put strategic biopharma marketing and operations. She was trying to transition from marketing to operations, and so she put it both in her title, but over time she really did segue into operations, and she did it very deliberately. Believe it or not, Gisela thought she was being pigeonholed in marketing. She'd been, 10 years in marketing or something, and she thought that that's the only thing that people remembered about her. So we had to go back and dust off her advanced degrees and clinical experience to give her credibility so that she could actually be in some of these other positions. She also put agile change management and people-centric leadership. And so you look at people-centric leadership and you look at her photo and you go, yeah, I believe that. I mean, this is a very appealing photo. She has a great smile. She seems open. She seems relaxed. She seems approachable. So think about how you appear on LinkedIn. And if you think that your photo needs an upgrade, then do it. Now let's look at the summary, which is now called About. I'm just going to read the first paragraph and nothing else. But she says, Gisela Paulson is a biopharmaceutical executive managing strategic and operations challenges at Genentech. She has a passion for leading agile, people-focused change management and derives great satisfaction from building diverse teams and focusing on people engagement with the goals of driving business value beyond profit. So if you just read her profile quickly, you would have a few takeaways. You would know that she's very people-focused, and you would know that she is strategic and that she's flexible and that she's a change management leader. So all those things were very important to her. I'm just going to say that over time, she did become a senior vice president in clinical operations. So her goal, she met her goal at Genentech Roche, and she is now a general manager of an exciting life sciences company. And her next goal, she says, is CEO, and I'm sure she'll get there. Next slide. So I wanted to show you some other LinkedIn examples, especially if Gisela's example didn't speak to you. I was at Stanford Business School doing a seminar, and there were at least a couple of people who wanted to go from investment banking, where they had a background, into impact investing. And so I helped them think through what they could put together to be credible in making that transition. And one of the people I talked to could do social impact measurement, which was a big thing at the time because people want to know, well, it's great to invest in these companies, but can we really measure the social impact? So I suggested to him that he write some articles, that he partner with certain groups that were into that. And I haven't followed up with him, but I'm sure he was able to make that transition. If you look at the left column, you'll just see titles and company names. And so the next one is a programmer, and that's so generic. But if this programmer said front-end web developer, SaaS and B2B web software, and React.js and JavaScript expert, that would speak to a hiring manager for, technical positions. So, you have to think about what your goal is. If your goal is being hired and you know what the hiring manager is looking for, then put that in your title and don't make them work for it. The next one is a startup CEO. Saying that he's CEO of some little company that you've never heard of really doesn't say much in his title. So instead, he talked about being a cloud software entrepreneur, being into social CRM and big data analytics. And, people would say, oh, well, that's of interest to me, and they might read on. And finally, we have someone who's at a hardware company, and he says she says that she's finance and operations executive, location planning, and diversity and inclusion leader. So there's lots of finance and ops people out there, but not all of them have location planning, and not all of them have experience and passion for diversity and inclusion. So these are just ways that you can take different things from your background and package it in a way that's going to be most advantageous for you. But you need to have a goal, so you have something to focus on, and you need to know what you want to be known for. Next slide. So look at this. We have, I'm sure you all recognize this Zoom screenshot. I am drawn to 3 people in this screenshot. I wonder if they're the same people that you're drawn to. They're all smiling, and they seem warm and they seem inviting. It's not that the other people are off-putting at all, they're not, but I just like smiling faces, and I think most of the world does. So just remember that. That's a little bit of icing that's free, and you can use it all the time and get some great results. So let's talk about how we can best present ourselves in Zoom meetings. We've gone past the point, we're into this pandemic. It's like 3 months or so now. Having your cat walk past your screen, or your dog bark, or your children running around, throwing their Legos in the air. Sometimes you can't always manage all of that, but you can manage at least your background. So let's go to the next slide. So here's some tips for virtual meetings. Number 1, look good. I know that people like to tumble out of bed and, just turn on their their webcams. But, if you want to be taken seriously, especially if there are, people who might be influential to your career in the meeting, you might want to at least make sure that your shirt is not wrinkly. And you want to make sure that you have a high definition webcam so that you're not all blurry. And I think that one of the best investments that you can make to look good on Zoom is a selfie ring light, which is what I'm using right now. It kind of looks like this round makeup mirror light. Men may not know about this thing, but you can also put your smartphone just hooked onto this tripod, and you can do it any length. So you can put it on your desk behind your computer, or you can make it really tall. Anyway, look for or search for a selfie ring light on Amazon. They're $40 or $50. They're well worth doing, because if you don't have it, a lot of times with bad lighting, you just look like you have dark shadows, you look tired, or you look sinister because people can't see your face. So that's not the best way to make a good impression. Wear enhancing colors. Many of you are Asian American in this audience, and so I can tell you definitively that your color palette is winter, and that means that white, gray, black, these are your neutral colors, and enhancing colors are red, blue, pure colors, red, blue, green, purple, but no muted colors, no heathers, no tweeds, no tan suits, please. And then find a non-distracting background. And if you don't have a non-distracting background, I mean, let's say you have, you know, things that are just all kinds of weird stuff that makes it so people can't concentrate on you in the background. You can also do a virtual background. So my virtual background right here is, you know, the La Jolla coastline. But you can also do virtual backgrounds that just look like, you know, living rooms in your house or a library or an office. And you might want to do that if you don't have a decent background, if it's just, you know, your bedroom that people are looking at. Number 2, sound good. That means, you know, make sure that you have a good microphone, that it actually works. Speak up and enunciate and modulate your tone so people don't fall asleep. And do a tech test. And we did a tech test today for our Zoom meeting. And there were a number of things that went wrong, including me having no audio. So tech tests are well worth the time. Number 3, engage. And sometimes it's not always appropriate, but if it is, then please comment, ask thoughtful questions, and suggest next steps. Next slide. So personal branding does reap rewards. Number 1, people will respect you. Your name will have cachet. When they say your name, they'll actually think of something. It won't be a blank slate. It will be, oh yeah, that's that person that does XYZ. The ecosystem will advocate for you. If you do your job, then you'll have a little marketing team of other people who know you well and think well of you and will and make introductions and make recommendations and help you along in your career. You'll also have opportunities for jobs, promotions, alliances, partnerships, media opportunities. And all of these things will translate into greater success at work and also at life. So life is just better with a great brand. Next slide. So the question is, what is your cake and icing? Go back to that, mentally, go back to that slide that we talked about, the new leadership requirements. How do you stack up? How do you stack up in terms of creativity, in terms of leading transformations, in terms of embracing ambiguity? Are you a good communicator? Are you a good connector of people? Think about those things. And if you don't score really well against that list of criteria, think, well, what are the most important 1 or 2 things that I can work on? And work on it. And practice makes perfect, and you will get better. I mean, I remember I was told early in my career that I wasn't a very good public speaker. I actually was terrified. You'd hear my voice and it would kind of tremble and modulate like that. But, you know, I just kept on pushing myself out there. I had a boss who was supportive and got a few of us a coach that we worked with on one weekend to get our presentation skills up. And yeah, it's painful at first, but over time, especially if you really know your stuff, it gets easier and easier. And after a while, who knows, you may even enjoy it. Next slide. So for a strong brand, you need to be visible. You need to be a visible leader, and people need to know what you're all about and your leadership style. It helps to be an expert in something. If you're just a generalist these days, generalists are dime a dozen, but find some area that you can be expert in. And it can either be in a specific, more technical area, or it can be a horizontal management thing. It can be diversity and inclusion. It can be so many different things, but learn how to communicate that expertise, share that expertise, and add value in everything that you do and say. It's so important to message clearly, consistently, and to engage along those messages and how you want to brand, because people will only remember one or two things about you. So think hard about what those things are going to be. And finally, be consistent in thought, word, deed, and image. Be a 360-degree brand. Don't be just cake, don't be just icing, be cake and icing. Next slide. So you've probably heard this saying about you can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. Now, I'm not comparing any of you to being pigs, but what I'm saying is branding is not a cosmetic fix. It really should be branding from the inside out. If you want to have an authentic and sustainable brand, then we have to think beyond just quick fixes. Next slide. So I've put together a couple of assignments for you, which I'd really like you to do in the next 30 days. And the first one is taking a look at your LinkedIn title and really your LinkedIn profile. You know, try to determine if this is my goal in my career, what kind of title would best enhance that? And how can I pick the things that will really stand out? Because when people are looking to hire someone, they'll get all these little things sent to them, and it'll only show your name and your title. And if that title is a descriptive title, then you can say a lot of things that might spark their interest and then make them click again so that they actually see your cover letter or actually see the rest of your about section. So remember that if someone only saw your name and your title, are you putting yourself to your best advantage? Next slide. I also want you to work on your elevator pitch. And again, this is so important to making a good first impression. I had a client who told me that it was really due to her elevator pitch that she got her next dream job. She was in a restaurant. She saw a CEO that she knew from her old company. She wasn't sure if he remembered her, but because she had an elevator pitch, she felt confident that she could go and talk to him. And she did. And lo and behold, he needed someone with her background. And within 2 weeks, she was at this new company. So have an elevator pitch. It might lead to your dream job, or it might just lead to someone being very impressed with the person and your presence. Next slide. So all this goes to say, take charge of your brand. It is something that only you can really own. I want you to figure out what your story is, what your narrative is, and feel free to go for it. Next slide. So this concludes the talking part of it. I just wanted to let you know that there are all of these templates and examples in my Branding Pays book. And next slide. And if you can't afford $9.99 for the Kindle version or whatever Amazon is selling the hard copy for, you can come to my website, brandingpays.com/resources, and get some free templates. Now, I actually have templates that I didn't talk about today, but you could figure out how to use them. The personal brand assessment is a wonderful tool where you can send that to, say 5 or 6 people who have worked with you, who know you well, and get their input on how they see your brand. And you can do this assessment for yourself and kind of do an analysis of, how close or far apart, how you think you're doing and how other people see your brand. There's a template for the positioning statement, which we didn't do per se, but you basically have to answer a lot of those questions in order to do a good elevator pitch. which is the next thing. And finally, there's a brand strategy platform that we didn't totally get into, although we touched on a few things on 360 branding. And one thing that I didn't fit onto the slide is the ecosystem wedge, which will help you to think through who are all those partners and allies, the influencers that could possibly help you in your career. But just remember, it requires a two-way exchange of value. So always think through, am I just asking for things for people, and what am I giving back? Because being able to give value is what it's all about in this economy. Well, thank you for listening to me, and I think Keith is going to open it up for questions, so I hope you have a lot of questions for me.